So I've always been quite insecure and a little bit shy, and also just struggled in social situations of different kinds. But this got a lot worse for me when I came back from Australia in 2013, because I'd just been studying abroad for about a year as an exchange student. And during that year, I learned a ton of super valuable social skills and just made a ton of new friends. And all of those skills have helped me ever since. And so when I came back from Australia, I was like super excited to get to kind of put these new skills to the test and put them into practice, because I was about to start a new school as well when I came back, and I thought that that would be an opportune moment to kind of implement these new skills that I had of making new friends and talking to new people. But very quickly in that first year back, I started realizing that the conversations weren't flowing as smoothly as they would in Australia, and the things that I was trying to connect with people with weren't actually connecting with people. And I started feeling, and quite literally also being, very alone. So this meant that during lunchtimes I would start feeling very uncomfortable or extremely uncomfortable with my classmates, just sitting there and talking to them, because I wasn't able to actually connect with them and talk to them about anything. And this then turned into my face at one point, or a couple points, turning bright red. And that was something that was new to me, and it was crazy embarrassing. And of course, that embarrassment of it just led to it turning even redder. And it wasn't long until this became like a regular occurrence. So pretty much every time we sat down to eat, my face would turn bright red. And I started developing this anxiety about it turning red. And so each meal kind of became this thing of being scared that my face would turn red, and getting anxious that it would turn red, and just trying to calm myself down for it not to turn red. And soon that meant that I was started to feel so uncomfortable being with people while I was eating that I started trying to sit alone to eat. But my classmates were they were nice people, so they would come up to me and they would see me sitting alone in the food cafeteria, whatever you call it, and they would be like, oh, he's sitting alone, so we'll sit next to him. So they sat down next to me and tried to talk to me, or tried to make me feel like I wasn't alone. But that kind of just made it worse, because I wanted to be alone at that time, because then when they came, I had to try to talk to them, and that would make my face turn red, and that would make it even worse. So that then led to me soon starting to not eat at all in the cafeteria, going elsewhere to eat. And this also then, of course, soon trickled down into other things. So it spilled over into my everyday life, or my outside of school life. So just regular dinners with friends that I knew quite well. Even that would then lead to this sort of anxiety about my face potentially turning red. 8 years later, and this is still something that I struggle with a lot, and it's gotten a little bit better, but I'm still consciously or constantly nervous about going out to eat with people, because I always fear that my face is going to go red and that all of these things will come back. And this is even though I now know that the fact that I wasn't able to connect with any of the people in my class at that time was not because my social skills weren't enough to connect with them. It was just because of us being that different of kind of people. So different values, different interests, nothing really lined up. And I've noticed since then that I've met people where it just clicks and it just works and it's kind of effortless. And that's something that I didn't understand at that time. But still, this experience of turning red at that time, for that short amount of time, has kind of scarred me into always now being afraid of turning red, and sometimes, or quite often actually, turning red. So this is then where meditation comes into the picture, and a quote from Blaise Pascal that I think fits really well with this whole condition or situation. And that is, all of man's problems stem from his inability to sit quietly in a room alone. That is what meditation is. You sit quietly in a room alone with your thoughts. Notice that I said with your thoughts. A big misconception that is quite detrimental to meditation as a concept is that meditation is to rid yourself of your thoughts. You're not allowed to think, which is quite the opposite of what meditation actually is about. Meditation is not getting rid of your thoughts, but it is becoming aware of the thoughts that you have. And this is to create better focus, which I will talk more about later. With my anxiety, for instance, what usually happens is that I get all up in my head and I start thinking a lot about what's happening. So if I'm out at a dinner with friends, for instance, I will usually, as soon as I start feeling this anxiety coming on, I will start to think about, or I become hyper focused and hyper aware of every tiny sensation that I'm feeling. So my breathing, my heart rate, my facial expressions, my body temperature. And essentially what's happening is that I lose myself in thinking about all of these things instead of focusing on the conversations that are happening. With meditation, usually the idea is to start with a focus on something. Often it's the breath. You focus on the sensation of breathing and you allow your thoughts to come as they do. And all your goal is to realize that a thought has come up, note what that thought is about, and then let it go and get back to focusing on the breath. And so what you're doing here is practicing your focus. At the start, you will get swept away by the thoughts that come up without even realizing. But with practice, you'll get faster at realizing when you're being swept away by a thought, and you'll get better at letting that thought go in order to get back to the focus on the breath. And this is a super useful skill to have. You essentially acquire the skill of focus, or that's what you're trying to acquire. And I found that with my anxiety, a consistent practice of meditation just kind of helps me get better at catching myself as I spiral in thinking about all of these anxious thoughts that come up in my head. And I can kind of realign myself or regain focus on the actual conversations that are happening and what I should be focusing on, and not what's going on inside my body. And that way I'm actually able to kind of let this go a little bit better. And it's not like a night and day difference, but there is definitely a tangible difference that I can feel. This has some really great applications, not only to reduce anxiety and stress, but also to decrease things like accidental time wasting. A lot of our time is lost because we lose track of what we were going to do. A great example here from my own experience is when I'm about to start working on something and I start up my computer, but while I wait for it to start, I take out my phone and I start scrolling. All of a sudden, I look back at the time and 20 minutes have passed. Sometimes for similar things, this can be an hour or even 2 hours, which then means that I basically just had 20 minutes or 2 hours of accidental free time. And that then means that the 2 hours of watching that movie later tonight is gone. And this is a really underrated benefit that I've found in meditation. The fact that I'm now better able to catch myself when I start losing track of time scrolling through my phone or watching YouTube videos. In this way, meditation has really helped me become more productive with my time. And I don't mean productive in the sense of working harder or working more. I just mean productive in the way that I spend my free time and in the way that I spend my work time. And so instead of accidentally spending an hour of my free time scrolling through Instagram in the middle of the day, a more productive way of spending that hour of free time would be to do something that I really want to be doing. And that can still be scrolling through Instagram, but oftentimes I find that the thing that I really want to be doing is probably watching a movie or playing a game or hanging out with friends or going outside, whatever it may be. The idea is that you spend your free time deliberately and you don't accidentally waste your free time without knowing it because you were lost in thought, thinking about something else and lost track of time. So that is essentially the essence of what I've learned from meditating twice a day for 30 days. And if you want to get started with meditation, here's how I would do it. Start with guided meditation, because at the start you will likely get so lost in thought that 5 or 10 minutes or even more can easily pass, and you might even forget that you're actually meditating. And therefore, guided meditation, I use the app Headspace, is really good because the guide will usually come in just as you get swept away, and they'll remind you to get back and to find the focus. And if it's a good app, it will have a nice progression from fully guided to semi-guided and to then minimally guided meditation. I've just very recently started to let go of the guides and try my wings out at meditating on my own without a guide. I usually do one longer session in the morning and one 10-minute one at night before bed. And another common misconception about meditation is that you need to do a lot, but you don't actually need to do a lot. And a lot, or like most of the studies that are made on the benefits of meditation are actually based on just 10 minutes of meditation per day. And so you don't really need to do that much. And I would suggest, if you wanted to try this, to just go for 10 minutes. And that's what I did at the start. And also try to tie it to a pre-existing habit that you have. Maybe it's like brushing your teeth or taking a shower or eating your breakfast, whatever it may be. If you have a daily habit that you always do, then try tying it in some way to that habit, and that will make it easier for this new habit to stick. I do one morning session and one evening session, and I prioritize the evening session the most because I find that it helps me settle my mind and get ready for sleep, which then results in better sleep. And my morning sessions are now not really limited to a time, but I try to spend about 50% focused on the breath and 40% focused on some idea or what I'm going to do for that day. And then the last 10%, I let my mind be free to wander. So that's pretty much it for this one, and I just want to again go back to that quote because I think there's really a lot of wisdom in that quote about all of our problems coming from our inability to sit quietly in a room alone. And I really think that that's something that we kind of need. We need meditation in a certain way because we're getting further and further away from having that alone time with our minds. And I think that it is super useful, and it's one of those ways that we can use to kind of settle our minds and kind of get rid of a lot of that noise that can be going on in your mind. Because a lot of times today, what we do is when we commute to work or when we walk somewhere, we're listening to a podcast of some kind, then we get somewhere, someone's talking to us, and we have to respond to that. When we get home, we watch Netflix. And for some people, when we go to sleep, our mind just starts racing and we can't really fall asleep, and that's me included. I have had that several times. Like, that's something that I struggle with a lot. And for some of us, we actually, again, plug in earphones to kind of drown out that noise of our thoughts in order to just be able to calm our minds enough to fall asleep. And I think that that's something that stems from the fact that we spend so little time just sitting alone with our thoughts and just going through them. And there's a comparison or analogy here that's where they compare your mind to an inbox. And essentially, the idea of meditation is that you sit and all your thoughts are essentially emails in your inbox. And once you do some meditation, you sit down and you actually get to go through that inbox, and the most important emails come to the top and you kind of get to sort through them. And that's something that if you don't take that time, if you don't have that time to sit alone and just be, then all of these thoughts get clogged up in your mind, if that makes sense. So once you try to go to sleep, that's when your mind has that free space to actually start to think about these ideas. And that's why a lot of them come to the surface at that particular time. And that's then what makes it very difficult to actually fall asleep. And I found that doing meditation right before I go to bed is a really good way to kind of still or settle my mind before I go to sleep, so that some of those thoughts, I've gone through them before and I don't have the same kind of busy mind when I go to sleep once I've done a bit of meditation before. So again, I hope that you got some new information from this video and that you maybe learned something new about meditation or how it can help you in your life in some way. I really want to again iterate how much I think it has helped me. And so I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I'll see you in the next one.